Welcome, Wargamers, to the deepest sewer works in the mortal realms, because today we're going back into Ulfenkarn and more specifically talking about how to navigate it. Now, in the last few videos in this series, we've built up a history of the city and then kind of given a snapshot of its current state, the one that you and your players are probably going to be entering into. But in continuing with the point of this series, I really wanted to set up or enable players and GMs with as much basic knowledge as they can have and just jump right in. So what I mean is, Ulfenkarn is a dangerous place, as we have gone, it's well documented, and navigating it is intended to be super dangerous. One of the many ways survivors or players can navigate this is by using the city's canals and sewer works. But since the necroquake, a lot has changed to make these passages nearly as dangerous as the city above, but in a very different way. And since it's very important as an option for your party, no matter what your party is made of or what their goals in Ulfenkarn are, it's important to understand how to move through the space. And so today we're going to have a spoiler-free chat about Ulfenkarn's underworks. This is kind of a catch-all term, catacombs, sewer works, canals, the underbelly of the city that players will almost inevitably be tempted to traverse, if only because everything with the sky above is super dangerous. Now, one thing I'd like to say up top is that this is from the soulbound book Ulfenkarn, City at the Edge of Death. This is a role-playing game book produced by Cubicle 7, who was kind enough to send me an advanced copy. If you're interested in this game or anything soulbound related, please consider using any of the affiliate links in my description down below. Using that link goes directly to supporting me, my wife, this channel, and of course the good folks over at Cubicle 7. It's life-changing stuff and I appreciate every single bit of it. Now, also, to be clear here, this is going to be a spoiler-free discussion because Ulfenkarn is a city that changes and morphs over the course of a game. No matter what you try to do, your effects have consequences for good or evil. So there's a lot more going on than what we're going to be discussing today, not even mentioning like the original ideas your GM can have, but this is just to get you a sense of getting around. So to be clear, what are we talking about? Well, this book, the lore book itself, lumps a lot of underground things together into a catch-all term, catacombs. But as we mentioned, it's actually a lot of different things. It's sewage, freshwater, trade canals, buried crypts of the city. Basically, any engineered tunnel, passage, pipe, or grave falls into the category of catacombs. And the reason is very simple. It's a huge mess. When the city was Mournhold, they had a top-of-the-line infrastructure. Remember, we were talking about the fantasy city being a megalopolis back in the Age of Myth. All of these passages were well mapped so that engineers could be, deployed to do repairs quickly. They were carefully designed to avoid existing crypts and tombs that, were basically already there from their forefathers, try to honor them. And as a naval and merchant power, they had a whole series of bustling aqueducts and levees and cave ports and that kind of stuff. There was just a lot going on. But when the necroquake happened, all of that went out the door. The sheer impact of energy either collapsed many tunnels, some it blew open, huge portions of the ground to create new tunnels. It merged large corridors, it sunk forgotten tombs deeper, some were pushed upwards towards the surface. Whatever the effect of the necroquake was, it seems to have treated all of the engineered structures under Ulfenkarn like dice in a Yahtzee cup, and they just kind of got rolled around each other. And so in the immediate aftermath of that event, to kind of compound, how things would go, Radjikar starts killing people, and many of them would flee to hide, but when they got down there, nothing was where it was supposed to be. So let's say you were once an engineer and you're like, seeing that's all that's going on in the city, you're like, hey, follow me, I can lead us to safety. You go to a manhole that you've seen and walked by every single day your entire life, you pop it open, get to the bottom, and you don't recognize a single thing. You could walk to the end of a hall thinking, okay, at the other end of this door is an access pipe going upward, only for that door to open now into a crypt full of enemies because those cells merged, if you will. Equally confusing, what if it is an access pipe, but the hallways shifted in such a way that the rooms changed almost like into a fun house. So now, the door's there, but the door doesn't open to where you think it goes. And instead of bypassing enemies, it drops you into the middle of them. It's disorienting, and that's partially the way Radjikar wants it. And just to be clear, for those of you who are trying to build the narrative and stuff, this is not a location that you would normally find Radjikar. I'm not going to say never, because your narratives can do whatever they want, but generally speaking, he's not going to be down here. He doesn't have a deep interest in the sewer system. What he does have an interest in is security. And to keep the Ebon Citadel unassailable, part of his plans when he took control of the city was to destroy as much written knowledge about Mournhold, its infrastructure, its engineering as possible. Blueprints, schematics, maps, work logs, logistics, all of it. And his logic is that if no one knows the layout of the Undercity, it can't be used against him. They can't come up from underground to the Ebony Citadel, at least in a coordinated way. And so he's confident that any kind of, scouting to reveal that kind of location or how they can map how to assault him from below, well, at some point that would be detected. And this provides enough of an obstacle for people to give him plenty of time to detect them. Now, practically speaking, what this means is you can't just burrow underground and go straight to Radjikar, because it's very difficult to do. But also it means that map information is super scarce and somewhat unreliable. You have to remember that the tectonic activity that started with the necroquake has not ended. So even mapping something now is difficult because tunnels will collapse and twist and bend. And I'm going to talk about why I think maps are still very important and interesting here at the end of the video, but moving on, this might seem like a purposely vague kind of region, right? The Undercity, there's like exploration charts you can roll on to have like random occurrences happen, and it kind of seems very vague and indistinct. However, I will say there are a few notable things within the catacombs in general. First off is a space known as Chitterbone Crack. Super deep under the city, but put simply, it's the remnants of a Skaven gnawhole. Back in the Age of Chaos, the Skaven clan Riskit, which is the best name ever, plotted a way into the city of Mournhold. They studied its defenses from afar and assumed it was weak in the center, so they tried to burrow up using gnawholes. They burrow upward, hit some of the canal works, now there's a gnawhole leading directly to the sewer system of Mournhold. But what they did not account for was Radjikar the Beast being in the center of the city waiting for them. And the sheer violence of his purge of Skaven pushed all of the Skaven back into this gnawhole, and he basically sealed it. But remember, now this is generally forgotten, right? There's very few people who remember this event from history, except for a few of Radjikar's guard who wear Skaven pelts on them, like in honor of this huge purging of Skaven. And I just think it's such a rad image. Like, normally you think of a dramatic charge being forward, and instead Radjikar's like, hand me a shovel, we diggin'. But remember, I said before that these locations that we're mentioning, crypts, tombs, in this case, a semi-active gnawhole, or at least a dormant gnawhole that leads directly to an army of Skaven, is one more dice in the Yahtzee cup. So if you, as a GM, want Skaven, it's a way to pull them from the earth. Again, narrative devices. These things are just rolling around in the earth regardless of whether or not you interact with them. While that's a specific example of a specific cave opening or a point, the gnawhole, being moved around, the other kind of thing I wanted to highlight for you is another catch-all term called Leech parlors. Now, what is a Leech parlor? Well, in the second video of this series, I had mentioned that bloodletting had become its own crude form of currency amongst the survivors. I'll give blood in your place, this way when the blood, donation guy comes by, you can give him mine instead of yours. It weakens me, but if I get something worth the bargain, I'll do it. And so leech parlors are a catch-all term for any business, den, or enterprise that uses blood as its currency. People will offer blood donations by the pint just to get a good meal or a night's sleep in a bed. The stored blood is then offered up to the vampires as an offering to pay off transgressions, or just the daily tithe / because they feel like it. Now, you do not have to participate in it, because of course, you can be a vampire and soulbound, so your blood wouldn't matter. And there's some real pluses and minuses to it. Obviously meaning you become a little weaker and you need time to recover. But as far as interacting with the populace and having a meaningful currency to them, it can be an asset. The book mentions that every district in the city will have at least one, but there's often many. And these are like built into the entrances of Catacombs, just someplace in the city itself where it's just slightly visible and knowable, just not totally obvious. And so I put that out there for GM. So if you have a kind of business or a bargain that you want to facilitate, having something like function as a leech parlor is a great way to do it. Now, lastly, are the outer canals, which there's not a lot of detail to them, but they do act as a very important means of navigating the city. Along the wall of the 5 major districts, separating them from the slums and the farming, is a small canal. Most of it's dried up or fallen into disrepair, but one vessel is still able to operate, and it does this circuitous loop over and over and over again. The ship is called the Mist Cutter. And this is a ferry boat that is a slice of the past that continues its route day after day in an endless cycle around the city, just moving junk from one part to another, moving bodies, rubble, whatever needs to be done. And while it's fast and reliable, being out in open water in an uncovered craft poses its own dangers depending on the time of day that you ride this thing. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now I'm going to end this video like I end all of my videos by saying, why is this cool? Right? Why did I spend a whole video talking about getting around Ulfenkarn? Navigating this city to get from one objective to the next, or the next place of safety, if not an objective, is its own fun puzzle. And the answer depends entirely on you and your team. You may be put in a situation where a blood donation is required to get through a passageway that is very secure, but if you're all vampires, that's not really an option. Likewise, you could bleed yourself dry trying to help everybody else out and see how far that gets you. And really what it provides is just options, right? Do you risk the ever-changing catacombs? They could be a dead end or drop you into danger. Or how about the choked alleys and corridors of the city above? Those have to be weighed and measured on a daily basis. Perhaps you think you can circumvent the city altogether and ride a boat around it. But what's the cost of such a ride? And how do you know what to expect wherever you are dropped off? If you ever played the game Morrowind back in the day, it's honestly why I enjoyed that game so much. It's that it rewarded you for understanding how to navigate the space effectively. There were like different caravans and transportation routes, everything from magic people teleporting you instantly across the map to essentially riding the bus or boats that went around the entire perimeter. You had to understand it. I like being rewarded for exploration and that kind of stuff, and I do feel like this does it, as long as you have a clever GM who's willing to make sure you feel rewarded at the end of encounters. The raw material for encounters in here I think is quite good. So let me ask you this in the comments down below. Tell me how you plan to get around the city, or at least kind of, nudge your party around the city if you're the GM. Personally, I am the go-to-ground type. I would probably, I don't know. That's a tough one because being buried alive is like the worst. It would just have to matter night to night, district to district, because there are some districts we're going to talk about that like I do sincerely think underground is probably better, and then other ones where there's a lot of building cover and stuff. I'm like, I could probably find a place to hide, something like that. Maybe you don't have to risk it for the biscuit for no reason. So it's very situational, which is what makes it great. Your party has to figure this out day to day, and the day-night cycle is very important when you're playing in a city full of vampires. Oh, and one thing I wanted to touch on here in the end, I almost forgot about it. I had mentioned before why I think fragmented knowledge is really important when it comes to the maps and schematics and blueprints. And one of the ideas I had as I was reading this is, wouldn't it be cool if a GM gave you a map, but the map was incomplete? You don't know how much of it you can trust. So you have a map that says, okay, you're going to take the third left and then a second right, and then take the access tunnel up, and then that's your destination. And then you can follow that map accurately until the second turn, and then you have to improvise. And so I like that idea because you can use information as a reward, like a quest reward, to lead them down a way, but you're not bound to they don't have a map of the entire sewers, thus solving the problem forever, and they never have a challenge here again. It's limited. And I thought that would be really cool. I would really like it if a GM slid me an old scribbled piece of paper and it had a crude map, and me and my team were trying to figure out how to use this and how much of this we can trust. That's a cool idea. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you're excited to do and how you would get around the city, and I will talk to you next time. Happy wargaming.